What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today, as soon as I turned this on to start filming, I have my window open and my neighbor decided it was time to start shooting. So I do apologize for the noise, but if I close the window, I'm going to be super hot in here, and we don't want that. It's good to be back. Thank you so much for being patient during my break. I've got so much amazing news coming up, but I'm going to do a whole separate video for that. So for right now, let's get started with this series that's going to have so many videos. I'm super amped. I'm super excited. My focus is totally on this content for the next month or two, possibly moving through the summer. I'll throw some other things in here and there, and please feel free to send suggestions to my email, and I'll give you all of that information at the end. We've spoken on this channel at length about reptilians, and while sitting here trying to figure out what to write about and discuss with you guys next, I got to looking at some research I've been doing lately behind the scenes and came to a massive and major realization. That's the only species of extraterrestrial we've discussed at any length for any amount of time on this channel, except for maybe in live streams. I have a series coming up possibly this summer, hopefully sooner, or maybe going all through from now till the summer, about all 5 types of close encounters, which is going to lead up to me initiating contact over a period of however long it takes and filming it all for you guys. But until then, let's get to know, as best as we can for now at least, some of the other species, races, and types of extraterrestrials out there, and possibly even speculate about what their purpose is in visiting our planet, or even more interesting perhaps, what their reasonings are for their contacts with us, the human race. I am to the point where I honestly don't know how anyone could say that extraterrestrial life doesn't exist out there. I mean, are we not way beyond that, guys? To be so arrogant and narcissistic, at least in my opinion, to think that we are the only form of intelligent life in the entire universe, or even, and I'll save this for a whole separate series about the uni versus multiverse, across multiple universes, even that our universe, allegedly, is in fact the only one. I have tremendous trouble wrapping my brain around how people could ever think that, and still, after all we have recently in the past 50 years or so, have come to know is the truth of what's really out there, if that makes any sense. Try to follow me because I'm super excited. To the best of our ability for the human minds to be able to grasp anyways. Again, though, getting ahead of myself and all of the things that I'm currently working on that I absolutely cannot wait to bring and present to all of you guys. So, in looking at the many different types of species of extraterrestrial out there, at least the ones we come to know about mainly through contact, I would be remiss to not immediately address the grays. Now, there are the tall grays and the short grays, and honestly probably a few types of more in between, but again, sticking to the limited knowledge without blowing any minds, including my own, let's just start with that. Let's start small, if you can call it that. Let's start our research into this, or continue it if you take what we have already learned and discussed about the reptilians, and take a look at the grays. Grays, sometimes known as Zetas, are the most commonly reported type of extraterrestrial involving human beings who claim to have been abducted. While there are seemingly 2 types, tall and short, I'm going to take the liberty here and introduce this species, despite the differences in height, as one. If something major that absolutely tells us there is a gigantic difference comes up, I promise I will address it and possibly break my research down into 2 separate videos. But for this one, let's discuss them as a whole. They're certainly one of the most widely recognized species of aliens throughout the world. They account for about 43% of human abduction and contact encounters, and are described as having huge, black, and almond-shaped eyes, an extremely large and kind of bulbous-shaped head. Think that teacher from South Park that always says, okay, just humor me for a moment, guys. And tiny little slits for ears. They have little holes where we have our noses and are almost always described as hairless. They have small mouths and usually range within 3 to 6 feet height, and their arms are much longer than any human beings, with having very long, very gnarled looking and uneven fingers. They have gray skin, which sometimes is described as rough, but mostly said to be completely smooth and flawless. As far as I can tell in my research, it was the crash at Roswell in 1947 that first brought these aliens to our attention. The human public's attention, that is, to be more specific. According to Betty Hill, the first ever documented recording of a publicly reported abduction, which I also plan on going into an entire video for very soon. Lots to come soon, guys, so try to keep up, please. When she and her husband were abducted by these gray aliens one night in September of 1961. So most of what I'm about to say should be precluded with the word allegedly, but because I'm a huge believer in pretty much everything that I'm about to discuss with you guys and tell you, I'll say allegedly once and continue stating the rest as though they're facts. Obviously, you're free to believe whatever you want. Just be respectful in the comments, please. It's said that the Greys refused to revolve in consciousness. As a whole, they focused more on technology and, in trying to play God, ended up ruining themselves. The natural evolution of a species is that we evolve into higher planes of consciousness as we move through lifetimes. They didn't do this and in fact refused, thereby, as I said, destroyed themselves. They started fooling around with their DNA, wanting to create a sort of super race, and by doing so, they maximized things like telepathy and telekinesis, which obviously increased their intellect by a lot. They continuously messed around with and altered their own genomes until, quite quickly, as it happened over just the span of 2 generations, they were no longer able to procreate on their own. The chicks weren't getting pregnant. Obviously, this meant the death of their entire species as a whole, and once they came to this realization, they decided to solely focus on procreating by any and all means necessary. They mainly procreate now by cloning. Once they started using cloning as a means to reproduce, they strayed even further, even if not purposefully, from God consciousness. This made what they initially did even worse and basically took them even further away from their emotions. They were now focused only on saving themselves. They're a dying species who have been cohabitating with us here on Earth in secret for at least decades now. People who have encountered them have consistently reported that staring into their eyes is like looking into something without a soul or a soulless abyss. No iris or pupil, just huge and abnormally large black as coal eyes. Their head, especially when compared to us regular humans, is humongously large. Their muscle structure is very abnormal and their arms are extremely long, again, when comparing them to us normies. Nose, ears, and mouth are tiny, almost non-existent little slits or holes. The color of their skin actually has a broad range, even though a lot of people don't know this. There have been reports, though nowhere near as often as, just the regular gray color, that they have gray skin with bluish tint to it. Less common reports have them with tan, light brown, or even pure white skin as well. And this is not the tall whites. We're going to get to them, obviously, if we're talking about species of extraterrestrial, but the grays, but whites. I don't know. Most reports have these beings ranging in height from 3 to 6 feet tall. I know I covered this in the beginning. I don't know why I'm repeating myself, but bear with me. From what I understand through all of my research so far is that their height and skin color has something to do with their status in their community. Through all of these things that they did with altering their DNA and completely changing their genetic makeup, as far as we have come to know, the Greys are sexless. Their only means of reproduction is said to be cloning, though that doesn't make much sense to me because I know about the hybrid programs. Though, if you think about it in the way where it's like this, they don't implant the female with human sperm, and they obviously don't implant the man with anything, so they take the genetic material from the human subject and the Grey, and they use a cloning mechanism or technique, whatever, to make hybrids synthetically. There's supposedly a deal that was made between this race of gray beings and humanity at the end of World War II. This is something I've mentioned numerous times before in previous videos and in general as well. The American government, namely the Eisenhower administration, made a deal or several deals with these aliens so that we can have advancements in technology and they can abduct human beings for their genetic research and experiments. It makes sense, especially at that time with everything going on between the United States and the Soviet Union, specifically with the extraterrestrials possibly enticing the administration and governments to take these sorts of deals and make these exchanges by saying something like, well, if you don't, then the Russians will do it, or something similar to that. And then the Russians would have gotten the advanced technology. What did we get? Like microwaves at that time? I don't know, guys. Now, let's talk for a moment about Dulce Base. And I could be pronouncing it wrong. Come for me if you want. Y'all know where I live. On the Colorado-New Mexico border, there is allegedly an underground base that is secretly, or not so secretly, depending on personally what you know or believe, that houses a joint human and extraterrestrial facility. It's located on the border near the town of Dulce, New Mexico, hence the name. It's located underneath the Archuleta Mesa. It's been said that for decades, these extraterrestrials have been experimenting on humans in this base. So think of all the reports, and there are more than just a few, of people saying they were abducted, but not taken up into the sky, but taken somewhere either underwater or underground. Now think about the underground part. Guys, believe me, there is so much more on this particular base and so many others like it that I cannot wait to bring it to your full attention, to bring all of it together for you, and it is coming. Again though, and just focusing on the gray aliens right now, and why I chose Dulce base out of all of the others, aside from the fact that it's the most prevalent in my research right now, there's something that's come to be known as the quote, Battle of Dulce base, end quote, and that's what I wanted to mention here. It seems as though the Greys violated the pact made about what they were permitted to do here at this base and ended up bringing in way more humans for experimentation than was originally agreed upon, and this led to this alleged battle, which is supposed to be the start of some type of war being fought here on Earth underground at this base. So here's just the gist, and that is that basically an engineer who worked for the United States government named Phil Schneider says he was a part of a team of men just like himself and other military men and personnel who were sent to the site to blast the area so the underground base or lair, however you want to call it, could be built. According to Phil, when he gave a series of lectures in 1995 and spoke on this particular subject, his team blasted and then almost immediately upon going underground to look around, encountered a group of extraterrestrials, a whole colony of them living right there under the ground where they had just blasted in order to eventually build this base. They must have scared the wits out of these extraterrestrials, and out of the 40 or so men from various agencies involved in the firefight that day, only 3, Phil included, made it back with their lives. Where does this all fit in, right? This guy's death was shockingly mishandled, I will say, and it said that Phil said that the treaties did in fact happen, and they happened during the Eisenhower administration. The exchange of human experimentation for advanced tech given specifically and exclusively to the United States and our government. However, the extraterrestrials were wanton in their experimentation and were consuming human babies and fetuses for food and sustenance. It's said that there are 6 or 7 stories to this underground base where aliens, humans, and the hybrids are kept for experimentation and, of course, food too. Now, I believe in Phil very, very much. I want to make that clear. I also believe that his death was an obvious and blatant murder, and that I have no idea how it was able to even be said that it was that he took his own life. With that being said, I am not sure I believe that last bit about them eating human babies. I think most of what Phil said was true, and the rest he embellished a little for dramatic flair and purpose. Crazy sounding, I know, but believe me, it'll make a lot more sense as I release the next videos in this series. Here are some of the other theories about the Greys that we can never, or at least not yet, prove or even disprove, really. It's all left to speculation and what opinions you form for yourself. So there's some theory that these aliens specifically were created by the Draco reptilians. Now, I know that there are said to be some very kind, helpful, and benevolent reptilians and their hybrids roaming around in all of the underground bunkers and undersea bunkers and all over the skies all throughout the galaxy, right? There's good and bad in every species, and we know that for a fact, so I'll just put it out there though, so I don't get the people that are like, you know, Gemma, not all reptilians are bad. Yes, thank you, I know. Let's move on. So, we know that the reptilians are super strong physically and ultra powerful as far as technological advancements and hybridization are concerned. And that's just naming a few little things we know about them if we accept all of this as truth, right? So they allegedly created the Greys in order to send them out to collect the fear and negative energy caused by abducting humans and harness it for power for whatever reason for these reptilians who created and basically enslaved them. The Greys eventually revolted and decided instead to make these deals and pacts with the governments, not just of the United States, but of the world, and to try to do some good. Even in this scenario, the Greys aren't violent or evil. They seem to, a lot of the time, and in some cases, according to witnesses and supposed abductees, to give off or emit a type of lower vibrational, evil, or malevolent negative energy. I think, and I'm sure I'm not alone here, that we could probably liken this to the lack of emotion they have due to their own constant technological grabs and genetic research which brought their race down and made them have to start experimenting on humans and using us for these hybrid programs in the first place, right? Remember, they strayed from God consciousness. They don't have emotion. So maybe that's the evil or lower vibrational energy some people feel, because not all people feel this when they're abducted. To me, this makes perfect sense. There's also another theory, and I want to mention before I get to it, that there is a kind of theory of inside this whole thing that these are either all different species, kinds, or types of Greys or that they're just all the same but have their own personalities and form different groups who are all doing different things, with all of them thinking their idea and way of doing things is the most advantageous to saving their own species and possibly helping the human race. So another one is that these beings are extremely kind and benevolent and are simply visiting all of the time to try and help us so that we don't turn out like they did as a species, and possibly even so we don't destroy our planet. They don't want us to go down the same path they did, where they focused so much on tech and power that they lost their humanity and eventually their ability to reproduce. Therefore, they're doing everything in their power to stop that from happening by helping us as best they can when our governments and military people are constantly attacking and shooting at them. They want to help us in so many ways and are also protecting us from being overtaken and turned into slaves ourselves by the reptilians. I know this is all a lot, you guys, and I believe so many different things and have gone down more rabbit holes this time than I can even count, and definitely more than ever before, or even about any other subject I've ever covered here or elsewhere. Some or most of this may be quote unquote old news to some of you, and I get that, but remember, as I've said many times, that my entire life up until very recently, like less than a year ago, I have been absolutely terrified for no good reason that I was ever able to tell or understand of anything having to do with extraterrestrials, UFOs, and outer space in general. So please bear with me as I play catch up. It's so hard to stay focused on the subject of only covering this one species, but I am trying my best to do that as we lead up to trying to initiate contact. I want to be as well versed as humanly possible on every single species I can find out there, the good and the bad. Let's wrap this up because I'm excited to move on to some lesser known beings that I'm pretty sure I've had the pleasure of meeting in my dreams recently. And I started with the Greys because they're where everyone almost immediately thinks of when they picture an extraterrestrial or an abduction in their heads. I mean, most of the time, right? At least for the most part. Remember, there are no definites here, so take all of this as you will, but know that I trust in and wholeheartedly believe in it, and I cannot say that enough. These particular extraterrestrials seem to speak only telepathically and are easily able to control the people that they're dealing with's minds. People who are abducted or contacted often report feeling highly vulnerable, as their own minds will think something, but whatever the creature is telling them to do in their mind overrides that. Take, for example, the tape of Barney Hill's hypnotic regression back to the night he and his wife Betty were abducted. You can hear him struggling with his own mind out loud, and I'm going to paraphrase. The being was telling him telepathically and from the ship in the sky to stay calm, stay right there and keep looking. I'll be right there. Barney was yelling out loud, God, I have to put these binoculars down and run. Gotta go get Betty. God help me. I have to put down these binoculars. I'm paraphrasing here, but he was in absolute distress and turmoil as it seems he was trying to put down the binoculars and run to his wife and get in the car and go away. But physically, his body would not obey the orders his brain was giving him, but instead was listening to what the being was telling him to do. And that was to stay right there and do not put down the binoculars, do not stop looking, and definitely don't go anywhere. Now, eventually, Barney Hill was able, it seems, to run and get himself together enough to get he and his wife into the car to drive away. However, they were picked up a little ways down the road by the same beings or creatures and taken aboard the ship, abducted, and experimented on anyways. There's lots of evasive experimentation on the genital area specifically, which makes sense if they're doing genetic research, and also because the hybridization program they desperately need to save their race. While it's more rare to hear of actual sexual assaults from this particular extraterrestrial, that's mainly reported with the reptilians, and I'll be getting to that too because I've learned so much more about them since past videos, and my research goes way more in depth now. It isn't completely unheard of, though. This often occurs with not only other Greys standing around watching as if taking some type of mental note on something, but sometimes even with other human beings around as well, just standing there watching. Now, if we want to dive in just a bit deeper into this specific scenario, how do we know all of this? The other humans and even the Greys themselves aren't just projected images of the only way our minds can perceive whatever these things are. We don't. So all we can do is take what our brain can handle and try to make sense of and do the best that we can with it with the information or data that we have. Back to Phil Schneider for just a moment. I'll reiterate his death was extremely suspicious and came just 7 months after he went public with what he claimed to know and to have been involved with. He used to say specifically that he was afraid to drive home from these lectures by himself, and he feared that he was going to be murdered. Something like 13 or 17 of his friends had been murdered in the past few years, and all of them had come out, but the government was making it look like they had taken their own lives. It's very interesting. I've got to find the name of the documentary I watched on him, and I'll put it in the description box. box, all right? But I thought that was really worth mentioning here. There is no way to prove what he said or anything else, as I said, but again, I believe in almost all of it. Most and some say that all of his lecture notes and documents of alleged evidentiary proof were reported stolen. It was noticed when someone went through his belongings after his murder that some of the documents and photos he specifically carried around with him and showed during these lectures were obviously and blatantly missing. There have been rumors and reports of MIB involvement as well. Could all of this denial and misrepresentation of the truth be just another tactic by our leaders to make sure they maintain this culture of fear surrounding extraterrestrials of any kind? We know in so many cases, especially in the early days, the media played right along with instilling this fear in us as a civilization. These things are a threat. They're warmongers who want to enslave us and eat our babies. Well, then why haven't they? Because extraterrestrials of all kinds, mainly the Greys and reptilians, have been visiting here for as long as we know that the Earth existed, and that's even before humanity too. There are hieroglyphic drawings in the pyramids and all over Egypt, the Mayans, and let's not forget about all of the indigenous tribes / Native American people and civilizations that talk about all of this as if it's an absolute fact. So with all of that being said, who is making what up here? What makes more sense to you? That the world leaders, for the most part, want us to fear these entities because of the lack of knowledge we have about them and the possible better way of life they have for us, which most likely doesn't include any kind of government or military at all. Or does it make more sense that these things have been coming here most likely and probably since the dawn of time, but are just biding their time for us to catch up to them in weapons capabilities so that then they can attempt a hostile takeover and have an all-out war over who will do what and be who here on Earth? That's all I have for you today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video, as I can't stop saying or even saying enough how much more is to come here on my channel, covering everything I could find to get my hands on. It's almost become like a new addiction for me, so I hope you'll bear with me as I catch up and also take this journey with me as we lead up to contact initiation sometime this summer. Fingers crossed. Please be sure to give this video a big thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. Please go on over to MoonBearOracle and subscribe over there. I haven't put anything out in a while. There's not much over there, but bear with me because there are good things to come. If you would like a personal intuitive oracle reading from me, please email me your name and birth date to moonbearoracle@gmail.com. If you have any encounters with the supernatural, paranormal, extraterrestrial, otherworldly, whatever, that you want me to make a part of my listener encounter series, please email them to me at GemmaJadeParanormal@gmail.com. Check out the description box. You will find a link for my book, Missing the Fae Theory by Gemma Jade, on Amazon for the Kindle and paperback version. You will find ways to donate to the channel, PayPal, Cash App, Amazon wishlist gift link. And if you want to become a patron through my Patreon, if you donate $20 a month or more, you will get an automatic free intuitive oracle reading every single month from me, plus access to exclusive content. Usually it's early release of videos, and I'm working on some Patreon only bonus content as well. Be kind to each other, guys. It doesn't cost anything. Also be kind to yourselves and never accept anything less than others be kind to you. Always go in grace, smile at a stranger, and I will see you next time.